Well, really, a cup of coffee should cost more than a glass of wine at a bar, at a cafe, right? So if you think about a glass of wine that's been curated, picked, blended, perhaps aged a little bit, put in a bottle, and you're paying $7 a glass, maybe you're paying $12 a glass where you are. I don't really know, but it probably should be something close to that. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's where we're going with this. But if you ask that question, my answer is something close to a single glass of wine that you would find at a bar served to you in a glass.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Hello and welcome to Care More, Be Better, a Circle B podcast. Each week, I invite you to care more so that together we can create a better world. As part of my commitment to create a better and greener world, I'm planting a tree for each and every new subscriber to our podcast on our website. When you join, you'll be the first to hear about new episodes, exclusive promotions, and more. So join our circle and visit our hosting website at circleb.co. That's circleb.co. As I prepare to introduce you to today's guests, I have a question for you. Are you, like me, a coffee lover? If you are, do you buy your coffee from sources that you know are organic, sustainable, or fair trade? Most, in reality, have very little understanding of what goes into cultivating and processing the beautiful beans that make the world's third most consumed beverage, behind only water and tea. Well, we've covered these aspects in an early episode of this podcast as we met with Mokhtar Al-Hanchali of Port of Mocha. That was an artisanal, beyond fair trade coffee brand. It's been a few years since that episode aired. And while it's one of my most popular, I've been itching to dig into this topic again. So today I'm joined by two incredible coffee lovers, Bob and Michelle Fish. They have a storied connection to coffee and are primed to discuss the many social and sustainability issues that connect to my favorite beverage. They founded Biggby Coffee, a franchise coffee operation that works to do coffee right. They have 408 shops open in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, Florida, and Idaho. They also operate one BIGG, and that's big with two G's, just like the coffee, island in space, one BIGG Island in space, which started back in 2018. Through this effort, what they're working to do is to create farmer direct relationships that protect those that are doing the hard work of creating our favorite bean brews. With that, I want to welcome them to the stage. Michelle and Bob, welcome to Care More, Be Better. How are you today?
Super fun.
Thrilled to be here.
Now, I have to say, I think I've positioned it. I love my coffee. In fact, it's the beverage I drink all day long, aside from water. So it starts my day, it ends my day. It's my after lunch and after dinner little snagged treat. And it makes up a part of my daily life. So I'd love to know what your connection to coffee is and why you chose to really double down this effort, create coffee shops that are doing something better, and this big effort that you're undertaking to ensure that we have more responsible brews in our hands.
Yeah, for sure. So in 1995, I opened a coffee shop in East Lansing, Michigan. And it was pretty early in the specialty coffee world, 1995. Starbucks hadn't even really left Seattle, or they were just entering Chicago, I think, at that point in time. And I'd grown up on great coffee. Both Michelle and I, as children, grew up in Europe, and so we grew up in a cafe coffee culture. And frankly, pre-1995, I didn't really think America could dive into coffee that wasn't Maxwell House or Folgers or 8 o'clock or chock full of nuts or what have you. But we started seeing some coffee shops sprout up, and I was in the restaurant business at that time. I sold a restaurant and jumped into the cafe business. really love coffee, much like you do. I don't actually drink it as much as you do. So, kudos to you and thank you very much. But we grew a concept, my business partner, Mike McFall and I, from that one location to, the 408 that exists today through a franchise model, be considered traditional, coffee shop concept in the U.S., something like a Starbucks or some of the many other concepts that are out there. We've gone through all the waves of coffee, the first wave, the second wave, the third wave, and so on. And we were a concept that really loved franchising because it put people in business for themselves. It helped them achieve the American dream and so on and so forth. We became a conscious company in 2014. So pre-2014, we were very unconscious. And then suddenly, we got conscious. And it took us a while to understand what, conscious capitalism was. It took us a while to adopt what we call this stakeholder management model that we use today, and so on. But the transformation in terms of how we approach the purchasing of our coffee happened in 2018. And in 2018, I began reading articles that coffee was under threat. And that meaning that the supply of coffee was under threat. And it didn't seem possible because it seemed really easy to get coffee. You picked up a phone, talked to a broker, you could get coffee in. But as we began to dive into that more and more, what we discovered that coffee was under threat for two major reasons. One was the commodities marketplace, meaning the C contract. That's how coffee is priced out there. And in other words, the pricing model is a supply-demand worldwide marketplace that often pays a farmer less than what it takes a farmer to produce it. So farmers were beginning to walk off of their coffee farms. They couldn't make money. They went to the city or they began to migrate north. And that didn't matter whether we were talking about Central and South America or Africa to Europe or Asia and so on and so forth. And then the other reason that coffee was under threat is because of climate change. And because of climate change, weather patterns began to change, and wet areas became wetter, dry areas became drier, and it created a perfect environment for plagues and pestilence in the coffee industry that always existed, but with the differing climate, it sort of accelerated the impact of them. And so, again, farmers were walking off of their farms. And we came to the conclusion that the only way to stem the exit from the coffee business by these coffee farmers was we needed to pay them more. And the way we decided that we could pay them more was to buy directly from them. And if we could buy directly from them, we could eliminate sort of the unnecessary or the nefarious hands that touch coffee all the way from the point of production, all the way to the point of delivery to an end user like us or a consumer and so on and so forth. And, with each elimination of one of those hands is a cost savings that we in turn push down to the producer themselves, to the farmer, making them more economically viable and putting them in a position to farm differently, adopt different agronomy that could fight climate change. And so that's where we are. We had a goal of for Biggby Coffee of becoming 100% farm direct is what we call it, but building these relationships with farmers by 2028. And we are 50% of the way there. Michelle and I spend 128 days a year visiting coffee farms. We've been over to 100 farms, but we only have 4 farm partners supplying us that 50%. And that's about 1.5 to 1.6 million pounds per year. And the reason that there's only 4 producers, farmers, is because we're looking for a particular kind of farmer. And we're looking for a farmer that is generally treating the planet right, generally treating their people right, and investing in their community. And that's where we are right now.
So let's boil this down for a minute, and perhaps Michelle, you can get involved in this part of the answer, because I think this all conceptually sounds really positive and good, but Americans are also concerned with the rising costs of everything, especially in today's economy. We've seen, if you really look at what's happened over the past few years and you were to combine it, we're paying about 20% more for something like coffee than we were about 4 years ago. Now, there are many, many reasons for this. The cost drivers you mentioned are, of course, one of them. But a pound of coffee, like if we were to boil it down to that, on the commodities market, what's the pound of coffee go for versus what you end up paying for it, let's say in a grocery store? And I think that will help people get a lens for what the economies of scale really are already and why we might be seeing some of these challenges.
I'll start with that. The commodities market is very volatile. It's become more volatile over the last 8 years or so. But I'm going to give you a stat. On May 31st, 1976, a pound of coffee on the spot market was $1.46. On October 23rd, 2023, a pound of coffee on the spot market was $1.46. So what you're paying at the grocery store does not reflect.
It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Just like, my mind just did a mental gymnastic. It's not gelling. What?
So when Bob says farmers are being paid less than it costs them to produce, this is what we're talking about. Their grandparents could make a living in coffee, but coffee prices have gone like this, but mostly they stay down. At the moment, they're spiking, but after every spike comes a crash. And that crash is unreasonably low. It's impossible at $1.46 a pound for a farmer to make a living. Impossible. And of that $1.46, the farmer doesn't get all of that. Most of that goes to the middlemen that get it to export. The farmer may be looking at 70 cents a pound, 60 cents a pound. And just to give you an idea, one coffee plant produces 1 pound of roasted coffee on average. 60% of the world's coffee is grown by farmers who have less than 12 acres. And in our experience, many, many, many less than 12 acres. In Africa, there are farmers that are so small, they don't measure what they have in acres, they measure it in trees. So they might be talking about 400 trees, of which they're getting maybe 60 cents a tree to be their livelihood for their family for a year. So it is no wonder that you can't make a living. And most coffee farmers are in really remote places. Coffee grows at elevation. Often the regions are very much underfunded in terms of infrastructure. So they need other people to move their product. They may or may not have roads. They may or may not have electricity. They may or may not have schools. More likely not on all of those things. So they're very isolated, and they're trapped. They're trapped in a cycle of generational poverty because of coffee, because of the way coffee is bought and sold in the world.
I'm just perplexed by the concept of paying the same for coffee today that we were paying in the year I was born, 1976. But this also gets me thinking back to the conversation I had with Mokhtar. And, he was really working to bring coffee from a spot in which, it really originated from Port of Mocha, literally. And so that's why the brand is called Port of Mocha. Now, in his case, he was saying, look, coffee might be going for $2 a pound as a commodity on the marketplace. And I thought that was incredibly low, but then that means that brands are buying and then packaging it and reselling it, and everybody's got to make a profit along the way. So of course you're paying 5 to 10 times what that price is when you buy a pound of coffee, depending on the grade and the roasting and everything else. And he's talking green coffee beans, right? And that $2 a pound, he ends up paying on average about $6 a pound, and sometimes more, depending on the grower he's working with. But as he's worked with very small growers that are operating on less than an acre and working with a number of trees as opposed to big, big plots of land because they're growing in hillsides and things like that, that he kind of got in there and helped them with their operations to grow and dry in a more systematic way that would produce a bean on the other side that had the properties that he was looking for, and really getting deep in that story and then creating coffees that each had that kind of depth of story to them, where the flavor profiles are dramatically different than something that you would typically get at a Starbucks, just as a for instance. So I have this basic understanding of what it takes, but I think it's helpful for people to get kind of that that lensed view. You might have visited a coffee plantation on Kona if you've been to Hawaii and said, oh, I want to see a coffee plantation. And everything looks pretty great. They've got an open field and everything's in kind of rows, and the coffee trees look amazing. And you go through this manicured kind of showroom and they'll show you the green bean to the roasted bean to this and that, but you don't see all of the back end operations. And you are definitely not seeing what it's like then growing outside of the United States environment and these different cultures and using perhaps traditional methods. What I'd heard is that so many of these growers will just grow and then essentially take their beans en masse and they're therefore just kind of bunched together, and you're not getting the regional flavor profiles because all the green beans are mixed together and then they're roasted for much of the coffee that's available in the marketplace. And that this is part of what drives the commoditization of the market, but I don't really know. So
yeah, sorry, I'll just jump in because it's the other way around. The commoditization of the marketplace drives the behavior. So when you commoditize a product, you literally take away the distinction of the product, right? You homogenize it, right? Whether we're talking about orange juice or coffee or whatever. And think about it this way, that if a producer does not have control over the price of the quality of the coffee that they're selling, why would they bother? Why would they bother to make sure that the cherries get picked exactly when they're red and at the perfect ripeness? Why would they bother to ferment them exactly 12 hours at whatever altitude, depending? Why would they bother to store it in a manner that keeps it safe? They don't actually have control over the pricing of their coffee. And they're often, as Michelle referred to earlier, they're in very remote regions. They don't have the capacity to dictate price based on the quality of their coffee, even if they wanted to. And they're often taken advantage of because they don't have access to the marketplace. And I'm talking about both locally and globally. And they have no influence on that. So, producers actually give up, right? They know exactly how to produce coffee. They know exactly when it should be picked. They know exactly how it should be processed. But because the price is being dictated by the commodities marketplace, there is no point in them trying to get it right, because regardless of whether it's good or bad, they are offered price X.
Wow. So in your mind, how much should a cup of coffee cost?
Well, really, a cup of coffee should cost more than a glass of wine at a bar, at a cafe, right? So if you think about a glass of wine that's been curated, picked, blended, perhaps aged a little bit, put in a bottle, and you're paying $7 a glass, maybe you're paying $12 a glass where you are. I don't really know, but it probably should be something close to that. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's where we're going with this, but if you ask that question, my answer is something close to a single glass of wine that you would find at a bar served to you in a glass.
Yeah. Well, I know Port of Mocha had done a couple of collaborations with some San Francisco-based coffee shops, as a for instance, where they were charging close to $20 for a cup of coffee. And granted, that cup of coffee was amazing. Okay. Like, out of this world, amazing. But $20 a cup would certainly change people's habits. And I think what I've been frustrated by is that it seems like, at least from the outside eye, I'm not within the inner workings of what it takes to run a coffee shop, as a for instance. But we went from charging a couple of bucks for a cup of coffee in just about any location to nearly $5 without significant rises in how we're paying the growers. Like, somebody else is getting that money along the way. And I have kind of felt like, okay, somebody in this mix is making the money on the backs of these people. So we've essentially instituted slavery yet again, but it's just not called that. And so, there are some people who are putting out there things like slave calculators where you can do things like input moments of your lifestyle, like what type of phone you operate, what computer system you operate, what foods do you buy, do you eat shrimp, do you drink coffee, where is your coffee from? And then can calculate out how many slaves are supporting your livelihood today. And I think this is a very uncomfortable subject for people to confront. But when we start to think about the true cost of the foods that we consume and the beverages that we consume, because those beverages are foods too, that we are dramatically underpaying for many of them. If you think about the water it takes, if you think about the time in processing, the labor, and the social equity of the people that are working to produce that thing, this is a problem of the ingredient marketplace as a whole. So if you look at things like, green tea, we run into the same issues. If you look at things like, oh, I like my turmeric and my spices and I cook with all these things, those single ingredient commodities, because that's how they're treated, are generally, we dramatically underpay for the farming of them and for the procurement, especially to the people that are closest to the source, which means the farmers. So when you look at the true cost, or when you start to dig into the social impact of your purchasing choices, this becomes glaring and like really starts to be shocking. Fair trade coffee is only a little bit more expensive than regular coffee if you think about it in that scope. And this is part of the reason I think those that are in the know, like yourselves, say that fair trade may not be enough. Like that sticker or seal on your product may not be enough. We need to do things completely differently. And we're so far from what it takes to really ensure the livelihood of people along the chain that we need to flip this on its head. And it sounds like that's what you're working to do. So I'd love for you to express a little bit how this direct buying from the farmer changes things and what it could mean for what happens at Biggby coffee shops, but more broadly, like if we were to adopt this, what would it mean to the marketplace?
Can we share this answer?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm just going to open up and reiterate something that you said, and then I'll turn it over to Michelle, who's got the answer to this, no problem. But the price we pay for something, I have to say that we have a little bit of an addiction to low prices in the United States here, and it's unhealthy. And the price we pay for something, the dollar that we pay for something is not the total price that we pay. Right. And this is what you were alluding to, that when we buy coffee for so cheap that it drives farmers out of business and they end up in our borders trying to get across for a better life, that's a price that we're paying on that inexpensive cup of coffee as well. I wake up every morning and I can see the haze of pollution at the horizon. We're paying with our air quality right now because in a lot of these countries, they're deforesting and burning and so on and so forth. So the total price that we pay for something is not included in the dollars that we're paying for that actual product. We can just look at our daily lives and see that it's impacting us. It impacts us directly every day. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, you couldn't agree that it's impacting, you as an individual today. But I would suggest differently today that the chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak. But in terms of what we do changing lives all over the world, I'll leave that to Michelle.
Well, I'm going to start by, you had asked a question, how much, how does the value chain work? About 20% of the coffee, of the industry stays in the producing country, right? Only 20%. And there are many people in developing countries that are making a very good living in coffee on that 20%. It's just not the farmer. For us, our pricing model has nothing to do with the market. We have detached completely from the C market. When we find a partner that shares our values, we're values aligned in terms of how they're treating their people, how they are farming. Are they farming in a regenerative kind of way? Are they reforesting? Are they taking care of their water sources? And then how they invest in their community. We need to determine the price based on how much it costs them to do that. What are the economics of the farm? And what do they need to make a profit above that? Because they too need to make a profit and be able to dream. And that's the price we pay. It doesn't matter where the market goes. The only way to really change what's happening in coffee is to break the C market, because it's the C market and the speculation that happens with the C market that is the largest driver of generational poverty in these countries, truly.
And by C market, you mean commodities market? Is that correct?
Commodities. The C contract is what governs the price of coffee.
Okay.
Right. That's the mechanism. And as long as that is the driver, you're going to find the tears of children in your cup of coffee, to use a phrase we sometimes use. It's the way coffee's bought has an impact. Absolutely. We want our impact to be good for people and for the planet. And that means we pay for part of that by getting rid of as many middlemen as we can. You do need some. You got to be able to get the coffee processed appropriately and moved to the port and then on a boat and then shipped across the ocean. There are people that need to help in that process. We work to make that as transparent as possible so we know exactly where the money is going, and we work directly with the farmers so we know exactly what they're getting from us.
So if one of the largest coffee producers, and I'm going to say producer, in the consumer mind, Starbucks, right? Like they're the elephant in this room, I think. They buy a lot of coffee. They repackage and sell a lot of coffee. They have big partnerships at places like Costco, and so do the Pete's markets. And so even, they're not the only ones doing this, let's just say. And I think through these practices, we get trained to understand that we can get a 2.5 or 3 pound bag of coffee for $20, to understand that the coffee going into that is probably bought on direct contracts at a low price because of the volumes that they're buying in, and that they're likely pushing that price down to be able to accommodate for a 3 pound bag for $20 at Costco. I'm just trying to make the math work. And even that looks really scary. It looks more like that $1.46 a pound.
Yeah, the math doesn't work. To use Michelle's example, that 20% of the cost of coffee stays in the producing country, 80% is in the consuming country. So on that $20 for 2 or 3 pounds of coffee, if 20% stays in the producing country, what I can guarantee you, and this is going to be probably too technical for most people, but that's an FOB price. And FOB is what coffee gets onto a boat for. And it's the most recorded price out there because it's insured at that point.
It means freight on board.
Freight on board.
And so, it's
exactly.
the origin price basis, right? So you're paying the price of the product to ship from that location.
Correct. But that is at the end of the value chain in that producing country and doesn't reflect what a producer is getting. So often people, including roasters and other cafes and so on, will promote the price that they're paying, but that's on the boat. And most likely the producer is getting 20 or 30% of that FOB price, so almost nothing. Our math is that the producer needs to get 80 or 90% of FOB in order for them to be economically sustainable. But yeah, our frustration, I believe, is that there's a big dark curtain between the consumer and what's happening in the producer world. And so the consumer is just generally unaware. Yes, they might know a little bit about fair trade or USDA organic and feel like if they check those boxes, they're doing well. But I can tell you, those things don't mean what you think they mean. And we've been on the ground so much, we don't have to go into that detail, but they don't mean what you think they mean. We go beyond fair trade. We go beyond USDA organic. But our frustration,
I think we should define them. I think we really should.
We can get into that. But
specifically to coffee, just not to bridge out to all these other topics, but specifically to coffee, what does organic mean?
USDA organic just simply means that you're not using herbicides and pesticides. It doesn't guarantee, regeneration, return of carbon to the soil. It doesn't mean that shade is guaranteed. It doesn't mean the water supply isn't polluted. It doesn't mean that the soil is being turned to dirt. It doesn't mean any of those things. And even if a farm gets certified, which by the way, they can't afford, they have to pay USDA to get certified. 60 to 80% of the folks that are farming are small producers. They can't afford that. But let's just say that they do. What happens is that their yield will go down by 17% in order to meet that particular criteria. So it's suggested that they will get paid more for it, but they don't. They lose 17% in their yield. Somebody else gets paid for the fact that they are USDA organic, a premium price, I mean. And they just generally go out of business at that point in time. If they don't go out of business, the way they stay in business is they collect non-USDA coffee from their neighbors and include that in their USDA-approved farm, because there's very little sampling of USDA organic to be verified when it comes in as a green bean to the U.S. There's very little sampling done to verify whether there is herbicides or pesticides. There's a lot of verification done to certify an individual farm, but they could be selling anything from anywhere through that particular farm. So that's the example on USDA organic. And maybe I went too fast on that, but that's
I mean, I absorbed it all, but I'm a little bit aware of some of these challenges. The fact is that just like with any certifying body, it's not like USDA Organic police are on the ground there and making sure they don't do that. Just like if you get an MSC certified fish, that doesn't mean that there are people surveying and making sure that nobody's doing illegal capture of fish that end up with that blue label on them. So they're certifying bodies that review your standards and your processes and all your paperwork. It's a paperwork challenge, and then you pay a fee, right? And generally speaking, these companies that will go through these efforts are well-meaning, and they want to be able to have a badge that helps them market their product at a higher price or differentiate in the market in some way, or because they really are thinking like, I don't want more pesticides in my water table. I want to support something better, and I want to engage with responsible business practices. So in some cases, it's just ratification of the things that they're already doing, but yes, they have to pay. Like, this is real. It's not just a certification you get for doing the work. And then on the fair trade side of things, I mean, I would love your view. I heard it from Port of Mocha as well, and I'll link to that episode so people can hear from him. But in today's world, fair trade as it relates to coffee and chocolate, for me, are two of the things that are the most concerning. I'd love your view.
Well, there are two different, Fair Trade USA and Fair Trade. So they're two different bodies. This year, Fair Trade USA certified the cost that you can pay for your coffee at $1.52 a pound. And I can tell you personally, after having been on coffee farms all over the world, at $1.52 a pound, you are perpetuating poverty. There's nothing fair about that trade. In fact, in some places, it may not even cover the cost of production. But, there's a conundrum for a consumer who wants to try to do the right thing, right? That the average consumer's got a lot of things on their plate already. They don't really have time to do deep dives on the internet and try to do all of this research. So everybody's looking for a shortcut to feeling good about their purchases. I mean, the people who really want to not cause harm in the world really, really want to do the right thing. And they're willing to pay the extra money for something that has a sticker on it that says fair trade. The problem is people don't understand that it doesn't mean what they think it does. Label marketing is really problematic for all of the reasons that you laid out. Nobody has an army that can go and do spot checks. Even when they do check, usually, we've seen this a lot in cocoa and coffee. The producer knows you're coming. So if it's a producer who's doing something nefarious, some of the larger producers might have slave labor. Well, guess what? The slave labor isn't there the day that the fair trade guy shows up, right?
Yeah, because it's the child labor issue when we start to get into coffee and chocolate, especially out of Africa. Like, there's a lot of that happening. You can find the videos online, but like even deep assessments of what it is to be fair trade and why they're under fire for some of that too. I believe everyone there is well-intentioned, but I also believe that the certifications don't go far enough. I think consumers have a perception like these certifying bodies are just like the FDA, and the FDA will show up unannounced and will audit your facility and get into your paperwork, and they are a governing body, so they're coming right in, right? It's almost like being served a warrant. You don't really have a choice at that point, right? But that's not what fair trade or USDA Organic are, and so we need to form a deeper understanding of that. Now on CircleB.co, I offer a couple of different coffee and chocolate brands where I've done the work of investigating. And what I will tell you is that they universally are talking about the same things that you're talking about. It's a direct relationship. It's like going to a specific source to get a specific grade of chocolate that is responsibly grown that in many cases they're trying to do what you're talking about, which is more of an agroforestry approach to growing the cacao or to growing the coffee, where it's kind of on the perimeters of a jungle, so to speak. And so you're going into the forest to do some of the procurement, which is a more regenerative way to grow this stuff, but it means that it's a lot more costly. And your yields aren't the same because you're not growing in these dense areas with a lot of irrigation or other controls in place. You're growing more as part of the environment. And so scaling that beyond artisanal is the challenge then that we get to. So we either have to figure out a way to grow these things in a truly regenerative capacity with good protections in place for farm workers and laborers, the growers, the farmers, everybody involved, or we have to start to look at these things as the treats that they perhaps are meant to be. And maybe then I'm not drinking coffee all day long and I'm instead, sitting with a great cup of coffee, as a treat as opposed to my daily staple. And, I might resist that change, but it might also be the right thing.
Well, first of all, I mean, coffee is an understory tree, bush. And it's best if it's grown under the trees. And so we've seen, for example, in Mozambique at Gorongosa, they're actually using coffee as a crop to reforest with indigenous trees. I mean, it's really best if coffee is grown under 30 to 40% shade. That's how you get the best coffee. But I think it's not true that in order to produce coffee properly and pay the proper price, that would only serve the artisanal marketplace. And I think that's the thing that we're actually working on. I mean, Biggby Coffee is at scale. We're buying millions of pounds, not tens of thousands of pounds, not hundreds of thousands, but millions of pounds of coffee. And we're really writing the white paper to disprove what the industry says. And the industry says, hey, we're caught in an industry that is doing it this way. But the largest players in the industry are actually the perpetuators of the way coffee is bought and sold. So they claim that it's the system, but they are the system, and they have the capacity to change that. And what we are demonstrating is that it is possible to do at scale and not have it be some exorbitant price that you have to pay for a cup of coffee. And we've been doing that successfully. So, we're 50% of the way there, and it's quite incredible. We don't pay that much more for our coffee, certainly not much more than you would pay for something that is fair trade and organic on a store shelf. And it is possible to do it that way. Our issue is we have retailers, coffee retailers in this country that are social washing, that are greenwashing, that are fair washing, and they might be putting a 5% effort, or 5% of what they're purchasing falls under a category of like how we're doing it. But they market that 100% of the time. And that's the thing that erodes consumer confidence in terms of
let me see if I can step into a couple of the
please,
terms
yeah.
that you hear. Single origin, right? Like, so when you hear single origin in chocolate and coffee world, that's generally speak for like, we've got this direct relationship and this is somehow unique, special, artisanal. But that means that 90% of what they sell isn't.
Correct. Right. That's the top of the mountain. And there's much more to the mountain than the top.
Part of what coffee has done over the last decade or so, like your Port of Mocha, they're focusing on the very top end, the highest. Coffee's graded on something called the Q grade scale. Anything over an 80 is specialty coffee. And they're up in the high 80s, low 90s, mid 90s, the cream of the crop of coffee. And they have been able to move the price up there. But most coffee farmers, even if they can grow a little bit of that on their farm, most of what they grow is not that. We live in the 80 to 85 range, 84. And then even at that end of specialty coffee, some of the farms that we work with produce coffee that's sub 80. That would be the commercial market that might end up in a Folgers or freeze-dried coffee or whatever. You can change the price at the very top. We're trying to change the price in the middle. We think that's where we can have the larger impact, because there are a lot more coffee farmers that grow between 80 and 84 than can grow all the way up here in the 90s.
That's a really good way to put it. And I appreciate the distinction. Now, when you say you're buying millions of pounds of coffee a year and that you're 50% of the way there, what does that look like at the coffee shop level? Like, let's say people are going to head into a Biggby location. I understand you have one in Idaho. That might be the closest to me, which is kind of still far. I'm in California. But they head into their Biggby, what is the likelihood that the coffee they're drinking there, comes from one of these farms that is more sustainable?
So it's 50% likely at this point in time, but will be 100% likely before not. Most of our drip coffees are now farm direct. The last thing that we have to work on is our espresso. But here's the thing. We don't really have the answer to that question yet. One of the reasons for that is we would not allow ourselves to market the fact that we are farm direct until we hit 50%. We only hit 50% this year. And why did we do that? Because we didn't want to come out with a proclamation in 2018 that we're going to be 100% farm direct by 2028 and be
but that's what everybody else would do.
I know, but
have you learned nothing from Elon Musk?
No, exactly. So we definitely didn't do that. We wouldn't allow it to happen until 50%. So it just started happening in this quarter. But what we have been doing is communicating to our franchisees and to their managers and to their baristas. And what I'll tell you happens there, because I know that for a fact, is that the word proud enters into their conversation about the job that they have and the business that they run. So suddenly owning a franchise business is about making a buck. Hopefully you're entering into a franchise business that you're passionate about, something like coffee, which is what we offer. And certainly, as I mentioned earlier, that's part of the American dream. But when you can suddenly know that you're selling a cup of coffee that's having an impact in other parts of the world, there's a different reason to get out of bed in the morning and come to work. Our people know that they are changing lives. And I have to mention why they know that they're changing lives. We practice something called full circle. So, we go down and inspect farms. We visit them 2 or 3 times a year personally, and we rummage around their drawers and kick their tires and make sure that they're treating people right and treating the planet right and that kind of thing. That's a very heavy-handed thing to do. That is that we're going to come down there and verify them. So in order to build equity in our relationship, we have them come up here and they get to kick our tires. They get to open our drawers. They get to look in our stores, and something really magical happens then. One, for the producer never knows where their coffee goes. They don't even know what country it goes to. So to suddenly be in one of our stores and be able to hand a cup of coffee out the drive-through to a consumer, a farmer that says, I made this for you. And they're not talking about, they espressed it through the espresso machine. Like literally they made that coffee for them. That's one powerful thing that happens. But the other powerful thing that happens is all of our shop owners and their managers have met every producer personally. And so they actually know who our farmers are. We use these kind of marketing phrases like we're going to put a name, a face, and a place to every cup of coffee we serve, but we mean it. It's real.
Meet our growers. It's not just a tagline. Right on. Well, I've so appreciated the depth of this conversation. And I have to say, I need to try your coffee. I'm not drinking it right now. And so perhaps you can send me some of your favorites to try. I very much appreciate the work that you're doing, and I will be sure to direct people to both your coffee shop page as well as to your big effort with One BIGG Island in space. And people don't have to worry about spelling this all out. They can just visit show notes and I'll direct them right to those spots. You're also active on social media. You mentioned that you have a YouTube page as well, where I imagine people can further their knowledge specifically to what you're doing differently with this amazing effort to change how we commoditize coffee away from commoditization to a farmer direct relationship. Do you have anywhere else you'd like to send them?
Facebook, One BIGG Island in Space, again, is a great place to go. We often report out from the field through Facebook, through Reels and that kind of thing. The YouTube channel is amazing because you'll actually meet the producers yourself. You can do that on our website as well. at onebiggislandspace.com with 2 Gs. I think it's really important for the consumer to create an emotional connection with the producer. And when that happens, things can really change.
Well, I personally love that you've already been able to scale to 408 locations and that you're 50% of the way to your goal already. Now, these are big, audacious goals, big with 2 Gs, as I guess I should say. And I'm really proud of you both. I'm glad that we got to connect, and I look forward to furthering the conversation, especially at a point in time where you can confidently say we are 100% of the way to our goal.
Roger that.
Roger that.
To find out more about Biggby Coffee, see the links that we provide with show notes, and I encourage you to visit our blog page at circleb.co. There you will find direct links to where you can learn more about Biggby Coffee and also their amazing effort with specifically one big with 2 Gs island in space, their Facebook page and their YouTube page. Now, when you visit circleb.co, be sure to sign up for our newsletter. There you'll be alerted to any new episodes as they come out, and we will plant that tree on your behalf as we work to make this world a greener place. Now, I want to just close by saying you might not be a person who considers coffee your favorite drink, but you have to understand how much coffee Americans in particular drink every single day. Here in the States, America, coffee is the number 2 beverage. Globally, tea sits in that spot. So for every cup of coffee that is drank, we could think about the lives that it's affecting. And if somebody's only paying $1.46 for a pound of coffee, and you just paid $5 at Starbucks, where do you think the money's going? I think we have to be real about this. We have to consider the impact that we're making in our day-to-day lives. And when we have a resource like a Biggby coffee shop, one that we know that is doing things better than the Starbucks or the Pete's or the other mass chain retailer in your neighborhood, it's my view that we should put the effort into supporting them. Now, shopping local sometimes means that you pay a little bit more. Shopping with a cause sometimes means you pay a little bit more, but often what it means is that you're paying closer to the true cost of what that thing should be. So I encourage you to think about that as you go on with your day. And if you visit circleb.co, you take some time browsing around, you can be confident too that I've taken the time to review each of the brands that we offer to make sure that they're doing things responsibly too. When you do make a choice to purchase on our website, anything you buy, whether it be some of the chocolates or coffees that I talked about, or a gift item like jewelry, or even some of the supplies to grow a garden yourself at home, like the Waytex supplies, 1% of your purchase goes to support planet-friendly not-for-profits through our partnership with 1% for the Planet. Right now, I'm partnered with Forest Planet to make sure we can plant more trees. I'm kind of singly focused on that, but that could shift with time too. Thank you, listeners and watchers, now and always, for being a part of this pod and this community, because together we really can do so much more. We can care more, we can be better, we can grow regenerative coffee, improve the lives of people that are doing so, and build the future that we want to live in. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.